Isn't this the screen you needed?
No.
Okay. Which screen did you want? That
That
one?
one, yeah.
Send to everyone. Server. You're good.
Thank you. Victory?
Victory this time.
All right. Are those chalkboards?
Yep.
Whoa. Cool.
They got lots of writing to do here at MIT.
Yeah. Is there chalk?
There is. There wasn't the other ones.
Oh, something's happened. I think it's not actually doing the right screen. Okay, that's promising.
Yes.
Is anybody on the Hangout? And did Donna just leave? Yeah, it's recording my face now. I mean, maybe we should. Hey Donna, it's recording my face now. I'm gonna just try changing the screen one last time. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we got it. We got it. We got it. Okay. All right. And now, without further ado,
Nobody breathe.
are making MASS.GOV data-driven and constituent-centric. Thank you so much for coming to our presentation and being patient. My name is Brian Hirsch. I'm the product owner for MASS.GOV. Here with me is Harlan Weber, our director of design. For those of you who are at DrupalCon, I'm going to say some things that maybe you've heard before. Harlan's going to say a bunch of really exciting stuff that you've definitely never heard before. Some really exciting things happened this week that he's going to talk about, and we've got some exciting plans this summer related to that he's going to talk about. So before we start, can I just get a sense of who's in the room with us? Is everyone in here a constituent in Massachusetts? Show of hands. How many people work on government projects? How many people are interested in working on government projects if we make it easier to do business with Massachusetts? Okay.
I noticed none of our team actually raised their hands on that.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about our journey over the last 9 months. We want to be data-driven. We want to be constituent-centric. This is a new journey for Mass IT. Hopefully, we figured a lot out and gotten some things right over the last 9 months. We're also, not going to get it all right the first time. And so these are vignettes from our work and a summary of how we got to where we are today. And then I'm going to turn it over to Harlan, who's going to talk a little bit about where we're going this summer. So when Governor Baker took office a year ago, I can just sit so I can change easier. When Governor Baker took office a year ago, he identified IT as a major hotspot. And this is a concern that he heard echoed from across the state agencies. So his administration hired McKinsey. They did a big study. And then a year ago, they gave us a report. And here's one of the slides from that report. 76% of our constituents interact with government online. That's way more than any other medium, phone, in person, or anything. But user satisfaction is really low. On the right, you see McKinsey gives Mass.Gov a user satisfaction score of 32 out of 32, which is 25% lower than the best state government website, which is Texas. But Texas is not our competition. It is the private sector websites that are setting Massachusetts constituent expectations about what it should be like to interact with the world online in 2017. So compared to our counterparts, even the best state website is only half as good in terms of user satisfaction. So why is user satisfaction so low? Here are some examples. To register a new business in the state of Massachusetts, in addition to registering your business with the IRS, with the federal government, you have to register with 3 different state agencies, and they have 3 different websites: the Secretary of the Commonwealth, the Department of Revenue, and the Department of Unemployment Assistance. Looking for tuition assistance, to get all of the different details I might want from all the different state programs, I have to search 7 different state websites. When I do a search on Mass.Gov, when I search the content on Mass.Gov, I'm searching 250,000 different pages and uploads on Mass.Gov that are spread across 300 different subsites in our legacy CMS, plus 400 other web properties. and those live somewhere else, and that all gets mixed in with the same search results. If I'm searching for tuition assistance mixed in with the information about tuition assistance for residents, I also see search results about tuition assistance from the federal government to school districts who provide, help for special ed programs, for example. So when our constituents do find their way to the actual content they were searching for, too often that experience is frustrating or slow or confusing. And we want people's experience to be fast and easy and wicked awesome. So wicked awesome sounds good, right? Right. So great. Where do we start? How do we get there? So one thought might be go through those 250,000 pages and update them, right? Do a design refresh, update some of the content, make it a little easier to interact with. Some pages will take longer, some pages will take less time. If it averages out to 1 hour per page with 250,000 pieces of unique unstructured content, oh, it gave the punchline already. That adds up to 7,000 business weeks worth of work. Those are totally paralyzing numbers. So after the McKinsey report, the governor brought new leadership into Mass IT, which people may see in the news is proposed to be a whole new government agency now, the Executive Office of Technology and Security and Digital Services, our team with it. So they gave us the following marching orders to jumpstart this project. Number one, start at the top. There's this management principle known as the 80-20 rule, or in economics, the Pareto principle. So the idea is basically 20% of the content most likely generates 80% or more of the value. So they said to us, go figure out what your top 20 is. So we were skeptical. But for folks who attended Kyle and Connor's presentation before ours, what these guys actually were able to figure out is the following. 10% of our content—
it's actually even worse.
10% of our content serves 89% of our page requests. And they looked at the different paths that people travel through the website using our Google Analytics data. And each of these paths pretty neatly aligns with 20 different clusters, which align to pretty specific government services. So there are basically 20 topics and 10% of content that make up that top category of content on our website. The second thing that our leadership did to get us focused was to narrow the scope of MASS.GOV's purpose. So they identified a much clearer target audience. MASS.GOV, the flagship digital property for the state of Massachusetts, is all about constituents. And it's all about giving constituents the fastest, easiest path to getting the services that they need or to getting the information that they need. So if information about employees or government procurement procedures or HR policies or services that one government agency provides to another government agency is distracting or confusing our constituents on the way to the content they need, then that content belongs somewhere else. It doesn't belong on Mass.gov. And if no one ever looks at the distracting content, that also belongs somewhere else. That doesn't belong on Mass.gov.
We found, when we did some of the data work, we found like an absurd number of pages that get under, I think, something like 500 hits a year.
Yeah.
Like the long tail for us is really, really, really long.
So there's no authoritative list of government services to draw from today. We're building it as we go. But so far we've identified 66 services that fit into that top 20 government services categories that Kyle and Connor helped us zero in on. And then among those 66 services, there are 400 tasks or like transactional interactions that we have with people. So these are what we call G2C or G2B, government to constituent or government to business. And then the rest of the services on the website are what we call G2G, government to government. So there's this Venn diagram that is increasingly coming into focus. The top 10% of traffic pages, services, and specifically the G2C and G2B services. That's the tippy top of our 80-20 pyramid. And that's where we're going to have the biggest impact by making the smallest number of changes. And that's where over the last 9 months, we've been really laser focused on trying, testing, and iterating until we really get it right before we move on and think about anything else. So great, we have a starting point. What next? We know things need to change. We know we're not going to get everything right on the first try. We also know this is a cannot fail project. So we're getting work in front of users as fast as we can, releasing early and often so that we can have as many try, test, iterate opportunities as we can before launch to tune and adjust our approach. So we work in project-wide quarterly cycles, broken down team by team into 2-week sprints. And in our first cycle, that was last summer up until November, we built a proof of concept pilot site. And the proof of concept brought 3 critical foundational parts together. Pattern Lab, which we're using for our atomic design, our platform agnostic atomic design that is suitable for use both on our Drupal MASS.GOV, but also on non-Drupal platforms. Drupal as the new platform, and then constituent-centric, easy to read, written to a 6th grade level content that is written following a repeatable template that can be used by varying different types of writers. So cycle 1, we brought these 3 things together, we got it out into the wild. In cycle 2, between December and March, we started showing this new content consumer experience to real constituents and getting feedback and iterating. And so here's what that all. So for the 66 G2C and G2B services at the tippy top, we've been trying and refining different approaches to bring together different pieces of content that our constituents need all in a single place, even when it cuts across different government agencies and different branches of government. So we call these kinds of pages services pages. And a service page, which is on the right, is basically a repeatable template for pulling together that content from across agencies, from across branches of government, to give constituents everything they need to know about that service in one place, whether it's registering for a business, finding tuition assistance, or anything else.
So is the goal actually to make it so they don't need to go to those other pages, or are you just giving a central place to access those other pages?
So for now, it's all of the information that you need to zero in on the specific transaction that you want. And then, if you're actually applying for unemployment assistance, we send you to the unemployment's system. There is a grander plan using this new atomic design system to bring everything into one common user experience, one common look and feel. It won't all be powered by Drupal, but hopefully, increasingly from the user perspective, it'll be more and more consistent.
This page, I think we think about it on the design side as having a hub and spoke sort of model. So there's one key conversion point, one key sort of action we want you to do on a service page. So in the case of unemployment, that may mean jumping off to the application where you can apply for unemployment. But also all the supplemental information about unemployment can also be found on that service page. So you don't have to go jumping around to different parts of the site to find information that previously have been scattered based on the agency that was delivering it. Sort of how Brian mentioned it around the register for your business stuff. Previously, you'd have to go to like 5 different websites. Now you have to go to one place and then link you off appropriately to all those spaces.
So here's an example of the latest design, and this is actually going through QA right now. So stay tuned, and soon on the pilot site, we'll be pushing a bunch of new content live with this new service page. Getting here and figuring out how to make pages like this took a lot of testing and iteration. So here's how we've gone about soliciting different kinds of feedback and evolving from a proof of concept to something more polished that looks like this, which you'll be seeing more and more of throughout the summer. AIGA, the American Institute for Graphic Artists, hosted a public design critique for us. There's a video that I was going to show. It's like 2 minutes long. I'm going to skip it because I don't want us to miss the end of the presentation. But it's online on our pilot site, and I'll tweet it at the end if people want to check it out. Basically, 150 really smart people, graphic designers, user experience designers, brand designers, got in a room, grilled Harlan as well as one of our user experience designers from Valier, Ned, who is here at the conference somewhere. Asked a lot of questions, gave really great feedback. If you've noticed that we don't have a logo on pilot.mass.gov, which is where our work is live right now, it is because we really took some of their feedback to heart, and we're still working on it.
Were any of you there? I know you were there. Yeah. If you ever have the opportunity to get up in front of 120 to 150 of your peers and show off your design work in a really public forum, like, I highly recommend it. It is a experience.
So we used a tool called TreeJack for making the website easier to navigate. Many of the TreeJack tests that we tried were pretty positive, but here's one that's an example that highlights room for improvement. So in this particular test, we asked the user a question. If you're thinking of moving to Massachusetts with your family, including your 2 children ages 7 and 12, where would you go to find information on schools? So the pie in the bottom left represents users who found their destination in green and users who got lost in red. And then the pie tree on the right is visualizing the paths that they took. So we put school information under a top-level menu item called learning. Of the people who took the test went to living and then got lost. So happily, we found this out in December. That gives us lots of time to tune before we go live later in the year. We partnered with the Perkins School for the Blind to test for meaningful accessibility above and beyond just basic ADA, Americans with Disability Act compliance. So here you see a user interacting with a page that is WCAG 2.0 compliant. That's the new ADA standard. Blind users who use keyboards to navigate the website, mice or touch screens, so they're listening with a screen reader with an oral interface, actually had a pretty positive experience. In Drupal 8, we have a lot of control over the tab order, as well as the Drupal Announce API makes it really easy to give oral cues when things are changing on the screen. Something that you can't find out from compliance, which you see in this picture here, here's a user who has low sight, and she zoomed way, 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 way in on that screen. And so she never makes it to the critical information in the right sidebar. This next page shows you...
Can I jump in there for one quick second?
Sure.
So I was out doing this testing. Like, if you've never done tests like this, go out and do it. It will blow you away the way that people who use assistive technology use your stuff. So the Zoom she was doing, it really was sort of, we didn't know why she was having that effect. The software she uses zooms at the operating system level. So all of our responsive breakpoints, all of the stuff that we were using to like make sure that as the screen gets smaller, like didn't matter, blown away. And so she was having, like Brian said, this terrible experience that like really was like actually very effective for our team.
Can you count that?
I mean, where we landed is that you really can't.
It's the OS level.
Like we can't, everything that we can control, we have controlled for.
Well, but you can change it when you know that it's a problem, which is what I'll show you in just 1 second.
Yeah. Oh, in terms of, yeah.
So here, what we saw in this test is actually sighted users having, in the case of the picture I just showed, the same problem. So here you see a tool called Validately, which we use for sighted users. This was particularly a good fit for us because it recruits the testers for us. So that let us have demographically diverse and representative tester groups. So here we used Validately to see how a page performs when a user gets to their destination. So is it actually easier for them to use to do something like responding to a summons or applying for something or changing their address? Where some user interactions were confusing for both sighted or no sight users, that really helped us zero in on high value page layout problems and rooms for improvement. So for example, revisiting the placement of quick actions is one of those places with overlap. We had these callouts in the right sidebar of our how-to pages. And so we moved those over now. They're right in the middle section. Here you can see the evolution of the how-to page's parent page, the service page. We used to call these subtopic pages, which were basically just topical groupings of transactional interactions with users. So we're reinventing this as something more usable and more meaningful, which we now call service pages. And then bubbling up to the related parent page, which we call a topic page. Hopefully now these are going to be more effective at getting constituents the information they need to zero in on the right service more quickly. So another focus of ours has been improving search to get people to their destination with less confusion. 70% of users start on Google and then skip the homepage altogether and then drop into the website somewhere else. So to support a better search experience, we're following specifications that are published by Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo on a website called schema.org, which enables search engines and also social media sites, Twitter, Google, to reuse content from our website on their applications more effectively and have richer experiences, whether it's in the search results or other third-party applications. So there's actually a tool called Google My Business that's letting us get some of this kind of value by inputting a lot of this type of information manually, and that's actually what you see here. But more and more of this will be automated once all of this new metadata is part of the markup in the new website. But to do that, we need our authors to make this major leap from unstructured data to structured data. Right now, in the legacy CMS, we live in this world where people still think of things as pages. As you all know in this room, the page metaphor is sort of evaporating in front of us right now. And we need people to get out of this mindset of titles and body, where they can do anything, and start thinking about chunks of reusable content and authoring for these meaningful chunks of reusable content. I'm actually going to show the video because I can't explain it as fast as you can see it here, and I think it's worthwhile.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, did it?
Shoot.
Hang on. Google Hangout problems. No, I think I know how to do it now. Hello, people looking at my face. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah. Nope, you need to do it in the actual.
Right.
Up there. Yes.
Started incorporating that content into our trainings and helping people understand the value of this new mindset and this new approach. And we think it's pretty compelling. We obviously think that's where the future is. Let's see if I can get our slides going again here.
So are you guys incorporating that schema.org meta information, automatically here are base parts level, or are you starting at that sort of incorporation?
I think this is a question for you.
Which part of the pattern lab level? Can you say more about that?
Are you guys in trying to get things more structured, incorporating schema.org meta information? Are you guys starting that exercise at the pattern lab, component-based level, or are you starting it when pattern lab and Google start moving up the data?
Great question. So I think there are two simple, fast answers, and then I'm happy to dig in, deeper at the end if you want. So in Pattern Lab, there are a few things going on. it has control over the markup, and so there is a coordinated effort there, or at least there is sort of clarification of responsibilities between Pattern Lab and Drupal about who owns the metadata to get it up to schema.org. But then we're also instrumenting the application to help us track everything as a path to a funnel to a conversion, which we can actually track and surface in superset. And so the classes that we're using in Pattern Lab are aware of that sort of mindset that in order to close this gap between the private sector websites and the public sector websites, we really need to be performance oriented in the same way. And so a lot of that is based on classes that are being defined in Pattern Lab. Which is a great segue to the next slide. So in terms of analytics, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So online marketers talk about conversions. The word, if you're not familiar from it, originally was about the point at which a website converts from being just a visitor to a paying customer. Now we think of conversions as anything that you can track in a web application to confirm that it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? A form submission, a link click. For some pieces of government content, the service that we're delivering is information. And so in that case, the conversion is, did someone actually read this content? So we're reimagining everything on the website as a path to a funnel to a conversion, and really trying to measure all of that and surface it for our authors in these dashboards that some folks heard about earlier today. So everything is about getting our users to some destination, to some endpoint where a service is delivered and that conversion gets tracked. And the quick version, if you missed the earlier presentation, is that we're capturing the web statistics with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. And then we're using an open source tool by Airbnb called Superset to visualize that information and to do a lot of more meaningful processing of that information to actually match it up to things like node IDs, so we can have dashboards that we integrate like this directly into Drupal. Sorry, so actually here what you see is a dashboard. This was actually prototyped in R before we made the switch to Superset. And here what you see is an early mock of what it will look like when we incorporate this into Drupal. This is actually something that we're coding this summer. So now we actually have these kinds of dashboards running in Superset. We're going to make this a node setting that lets you define the default dashboard that tracks the performance of this type of page. For example, a service page. Are you getting people to the destination where they get their services? Or a topic page. Are you actually funneling people to the services they're looking for? Or an endpoint. Is it actually delivering the service? So we have these default dashboards. We're going to be working with our customers across the Commonwealth with the actual service providers and state agencies to either use these dashboards or customize their own dashboards tailored to the specific service that they provide. So this is photoshopped, but you'll see this in the real application soon. What about the other 80% of the pyramid? So most of this presentation has been focused on the top 20%, right? We know that there's critical information in the other part of the pyramid as well. News, announcements, laws and regulations, government-to-government services, which are actually critical to the business that government does. So that's all stuff that we are starting to put a lot of thought and work into beginning this summer, now that we've gotten far enough that we feel like we've got a lot of good direction with that top of the pyramid content. So I'm about to hand it over to Harlan to talk about what we're doing this summer with the actual content that is live online. But before I do that, I just want to give a plug for Open MASS. So since we've got Drupal developers, I presume in the room, how many people are actually Drupal developers? Great. So Open MASS is open source. So like when I said that you'll see these dashboards live, obviously you're not going to see our dashboards unless you're one of our authors. But all of this work is on GitHub, and we're very enthusiastic about collaborating with the Drupal community broadly, with other government folks who want to build on top of this and work with us as well. So follow up if you want to talk more about that. Now I'm going to hand it over to Harlan to talk about what's going on this summer.
So I'm gonna try to take your seat so I can
Yep.
drive your slides without breaking the whole thing. You guys still with us? Yeah? Okay, cool. I know like we have the unfortunate luck to be the slot right before lunch. So like I know that people are probably like, looking at the clock. So design director at our digital services team. Brian talked a little bit about the evaluative usability testing we've done over the last 9 months or so. He hit most of the high points, but I'm happy to go deep with anybody who wants to afterwards over lunch. Just come find me and we'll chat. I'm going to go into some detail about our upcoming plans for UX testing, for tracking, and sort of handling feedback in general, and how we continue to plan to make sure the things we've built work for all 6.5 million people here in Massachusetts. How do I go next here? Do I just click here?
The arrow.
Oh, I did it. Okay. Cool. But before that, and I actually don't know why we didn't lead with this, but we have PSA, which is that we had a launch announcement this week of our pilot from Governor Baker, which was super cool. He got it on Twitter. We made a video. He got on screen. We have like, as you can maybe tell, we have this awesome video team that makes our training videos, talks to the governor. They're awesome. So we got some press and a bump. And that meant we started getting a lot of feedback too. So we're getting a lot of feedback, and people are engaging with us in a lot of different ways through our feedback form on the website. We've got some positive feedback. Believe it or not, we've actually got some positive feedback, which is always really nice to hear. Bug reports and feature requests and like some sort of mysterious sort of things like in the lower right. That came in this morning and I have no idea what it means. You know, any of you who've ever put a free text field out there for feedback, know that you are now exposed to all of the things the internet has to offer, which is always exciting and sometimes a little scary. So I'll get into more about this later, but talking about the feedback form and how we're planning on using it. But this is some of the stuff we've just since Wednesday. So anyway, regularly scheduled program. In our first year, in terms of testing, we hit a lot of the basics, but we're also looking to fine-tune our future testing processes, incorporating more qualitative and quantitative hybrid testing as we continue to develop MASS.GOV. So the first thing we're doing is we're going to continue to use remote unmoderated testing. The tool we use, like Brian mentioned, the tool we use is called Validately. It's like sort of a little brother to usertesting.com. For those of you who are familiar with that tool. We're using this to really test interactive elements. So things we need to really understand workflow and the way that users move across multiple screens. The thing that we're going to be testing this summer is our service suite, the set of pages around services that Brian mentioned, as well as, and this is something I'm actually super excited about, as well as getting baseline analytics on our authoring experience. So those of you who are familiar, I'm really surprised to see sort of what Drupal looked like on the inside once I got in there to the authoring experience. And so we're looking at making some improvements, and we're going to be doing baseline testing there with a couple of our tools, including Validately. The other thing that Validately does, and I'll get into this in a few minutes too, is it gives us the user test panel that we can go back to. So ensuring that we have a demographically appropriate mix of the people in Massachusetts is really, really important to us. Validately gives us the ability to do that by accessing their user panel. We're also going to be incorporating some single-click tests, some really quick layout tests using a tool called Chalkmark to test page layouts. So things that don't span multiple pages where we don't need to test how people are moving through a workflow. We're going to be using single-click tests. So we think this will let us move a little bit faster, make those iteration cycles, able to devote our relatively scarce UX resources. I'm sure those of you who are designers in the room know that feeling. To the places in our application that need the most attention. So for single-click testing, we're thinking about using this for our search concepts as we enhance our search, critical content types. One of the challenges we have, though, is actually getting our tests out to people. With tools like Validately, like we mentioned, we can use their test panel. But for our other tools, we need to rely on our own resources. So we need to come up with the people who stuff we want to test. As we started doing our IA testing using TreeJack that Brian mentioned, one of the things we did was to push it out on Twitter. And the response was sort of like this. So this is like a brief snapshot of the people who signed up testing pool to do our IA test. And you can see, especially in the column on the right, there's like a certain level of commonality that maybe isn't representative of Massachusetts as a whole in terms of demographics. So we'll be doing this summer is trying to be really deliberate about building a reliable test panel that we can come back to over and over again for testing all kinds of things on mass.gov. So we'll be working with a number of community leaders, working with agencies who work with a number of different kinds of people in Massachusetts, and of course a social push. So this is something that I think is going to be really hard, but is really worthwhile and meaningful to make sure that we're the government. We don't get to pick our users. We don't get to focus on 10% of the market and really dial in on it. We got to do this for everybody. So this is one step to getting there. We'll also be looking at enhanced page layout analytics. We'll be using a tool called Crazy Egg, incorporating that into our analytics suite, which will give us behavior analytics on page layout. So where people click, how far down the page they scroll, what they're trying to do on a page. Back of how users are interacting with each individual page, although we know that the page concept is evaporating. In many cases, it's still rendered, content still renders as pages. So this will let us see how users are interacting with each page over time. And it'll only get better as more people come to our pilot site and start clicking around. We're also tentatively exploring the idea of incorporating some of these analytics into the authoring experience in like maybe, I don't know, 6 months or so. So that content authors can have a better sense of how their pages are actually performing. I know that our data team talked about a little bit of this in their previous conversation, but we're also looking to be able to track user journeys as they move across all those web properties that Brian mentioned earlier in the conversation. So right now, we lose sight of users when they leave mass.gov. So when they bump off of the mass.gov domain and kick out into one of those applications, so like the application for applying for SNAP, which is food stamps, for unemployment, even for registering a business, we lose sight of them. We don't know what's happening to them. So we can't tell the effect that we're having on their service delivery. We can't know more about the experience they're having inside those applications. We don't know if people are dropping off after they hit the apply screen or what. We literally have no idea. So we're looking to extend our analytics suite into those applications, which like salesy work, working with our agency partners, but we're really excited about it. And lastly, as our project has picked up speed and we've started scaling both our internal efforts to onboard authors and our external engagement with the public through the pilot site, we've found, and anyone who's worked on the enterprise will know this, we've got like a ton of feedback coming in through very many channels. So both quantitative and qualitative in nature. So Google Analytics data, feedback form data, feedback from content authors, our existing feedback form on mainmass.gov, our qualitative user testing, Crazy Egg tracking, comments picked up from content authors by our training team. Like all of these things are all starting to like accelerate as they flow into our feedback systems. And so we're looking this summer to try to figure out ways to have those pieces of feedback reinforce or negate each other. We're going to turn our data team loose on those free text fields to do some natural language processing. And really just try and go deep on the feedback we're getting from all of the different sources that we're getting it so we can continue to make future improvements that'll deliver to our constituents. So what's next? That's all the stuff we've got planned. Hopefully we can pull it off. After that, there's a few things that I think that are on our plate to do, starting from the bottom. So right now, because of our the way that our project has panned out, we've done a lot of testing of live code, which is awesome in some respects and not awesome in other respects. It's awesome that we have live code to test, but as all of you know, like the dev part of any process is the most expensive part of any process. So the more that we can do more upfront prototyping and testing of those prototypes before committing to code, that's something we're looking to do from a process perspective. We're also looking to bring, once things are committed to code, to bring dev and test closer together. So really fast on this project and build things super fast and test after. We're looking to sort of tighten that loop and bring test and dev closer together. And the last thing is, for me personally, this is something I've struggled with over the last year, is really trying to find the right question, the baseline metric for how we're doing. So satisfaction is sort of like a fuzzy measure to track. Things like Net Promoter, if any of you are familiar with that, with Net Promoter. Who here knows Net Promoter? Okay, so Net Promoter is a question, I think it was developed, don't mark me on that. It asks the question, would you recommend this site to your friend? Or would you recommend this product to a friend? And it has like a very strong mapping to product success. It's a thing a lot of private sector industries use, but we can. Doesn't really apply to a monopoly government that, you know, is the only place where you can get some of the services that we provide, right? So would you recommend unemployment to a friend doesn't really hold. So we're trying to figure out what is the right question. How do we track how we're doing? So we know we can get to like some metrics, but in terms of satisfaction versus sharing, I read a book called Badass by Kathy Sierra, which is about making your users awesome instead of making your product awesome, making your users feel like superstars. And so that's led me sort of down the path of thinking about confidence, ability to do the tasks at hand as maybe a measure of success. Not sure. Those are things we're going to try to be figuring out over the next 12 to 18 months. And lastly, like, come hang out with us. Brian gave you guys an open invitation to come contribute to the code base. If you'd like to give us feedback, like bang around in the site and tell us what you think, that's the form. And if you're interested in joining that test panel, or you think you may have communities who would be, please send me an email personally. That's my email. And we'll make sure that we can get in there and help us test out MASS.GOV as we go forward. It is 11:59. That is amazing. I'm sorry that we ran into some technical problems that have cut the question and answer period short. We can hang around. I know lunch is coming up, so like we don't have anything immediately. So what questions can we answer?
And just, I think we can actually even stay later because of lunchtime if people want to stick around for questions. But before people trickle out for questions, let me just make a shameless plug that we're hiring. And we're looking for talented Drupal engineers and designers, user experience designers, visual designers, front-end engineers, back-end engineers. So please come talk to one of us afterwards if that interests you. And now, we would love any questions that you have.
So are you doing anything to capture offline interactions, sort of offline user data?
Meaning sort of like the experience you have when you go into an office or paper forms or?
Yeah.
Not systematically, not yet. Whoa, this thing moves. You know, one of the things that we're really focused on with MASS.GOV is, I'm gonna get a little technical here, like, is MASS.GOV? So I think a lot of those interactions often happen at the agency level, at the service delivery point, and we're not touching that just yet. So we've done some work, and especially with the digitization of paper forms, I think, is an area where we're more interested right now. But I would say not systematically now. And if you have different feelings about that.
Well, I think just to be fair to our friends at the RMV, for example, we MASS.GOV, we digital services at Mass IT are not involved today in collecting offline actions of people. There's a huge push government-wide, there's a huge push statewide to be data-driven and user-centric. And so, you know, just calling out the RMV for example, they are doing a lot to get better and better at tracking that and responding to it and building it into the way that their service centers work. So as Harlan was saying when he talked about Google Analytics, we want to take the next step of integrating details to their attention to those details so that we have a true end-to-end analysis of how to best serve people. We, the two of us, are not involved in that today.
We have been out to do in-person qualitative testing on some of this stuff. So the IA test that we ran that Brian showed, like I went out to a DTA, which is Transitional Assistance, who runs the SNAP program. I went out to an office in Worcester, talked to 15 or 20 people, gathered a lot of information, not just about the IA stuff.
I'm trying to get a handle on the size of it. So there are 200,000 pages or 200,000 unique URLs
On the legacy system.
on the legacy system, right?
250.
But 3/4 of those are documents, is that right?
150,000.
And so, You know, the top 10% that's driving 90% of the traffic are those all web pages, or are some of those documents? Is it a mix?
I'm trying to remember if that particular number was the mixed number.
That's. There's around. It's mostly web pages. Tax documents get a lot of volume. Right? That's pretty much what shows up. There are distinct documents, but they are special cases. That's something we need to see.
Thanks.
So obviously there's pretty ton of work to be done. And I think how you guys basically do scrum folks group, try to get, figure out the strategy, figure out the data, figure out the infrastructure, and MASS.GOV, how it says the centerpiece to demonstrate, across the whole thing that we're trying to strive for. How do you guys, I guess, there's too much work to do, with one team, no matter how large. How do you guys tackle spreading this knowledge and evangelizing it and getting other agencies up to speed with the direction you guys are going, both in terms of the strategy, the collection, the testing, the design process to that point, but also the development side of it, how to actually make these things stick.
Yeah, awesome question. So we can't do it without all of those agencies, for sure. So Mass IT Digital Services basically provides MASS.GOV as a subscription service to the state agencies around the Commonwealth. So it's like Mass.GOV is effectively a SaaS service that Digital Services offers, and our customers are all of the different state organizations and author content on the Mass.GOV platform that we provide to them. So the reason we have that structured content video, the reason that was such a breakthrough for us, is that it's really all of those authors, there's that really diverse constellation of authors who we need to be, number one, excited about and on board with this general plan. And then number two, we need to enable them to write really great structured content. So we work with authors, but many of them are doing their own thing. And so that's why the attention to success in terms of authoring experience. And that's also why integrated analytics is such an important part of the puzzle for us. We want authors, whether you're a ranger at DCR or you're a service provider at HHS, or you work with new businesses moving to Massachusetts and DOR, let's say, different people, many of whom we will never actually have conversations with, to see analytics about how their content performs, and for that to be actionable, easy to understand information that they can use node by node, page by page, service by service.
The second layer of clients.
Yeah.
We also do I feel like you glossed over a tiny bit. Like when Brian says we work with those people, we have our content team has put together a full suite of trainings to help new authors get involved with using Drupal, learning about the whole thing, learning about our content system. And further, we're using Pattern Lab for our component library. We'll be building out a style guide that sort of gets across our design philosophy, how to use each one of those patterns so we can extend that, at least the visual look and feel, and a little bit of our sort of design approach to other places around the Commonwealth. So that's coming, within the next year. But it is a big lift.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't give us enough credit. So to Harlan's point, we've trained 400 or 500 people in these last couple months.
475, I think, was the number.
Something that has been really successful in the federal government, which we definitely hope to replicate here, is building communities of practice around technologies across the different government agencies that are using similar tools or similar approaches. So we hope people will want to come hang out with us and talk to us about this stuff and collaborate with us. So hopefully we'll see more and more of that.
Sorry, another question. So about digitizing forms, how does that go?
About digitizing forms, how's that going? We want to digitize more of them. We do too much business in paper and PDF today. We use a tool that makes it really easy to build forms. It's really great for simple submissions, for anonymous, one-click type submissions. But then once you get into authenticated user experiences, or once you get into complex backend workflows, it gets pretty tricky. Both Harlan and I were part of a group called GovNext before digital services started. So we were a small, mighty team of 10 did innovation to prove that new things like this were possible to the state. And so one of the things we were actually doing was using Drupal 7 plus rules as a business rules engine for proving that not only can we do those form submissions, but also handle a lot of the back-end workflows to streamline government. So we had some pretty successful pilots. I predict we'll get back to that one day after the dust settles around this new, the new MASS.GOV. For folks in the room, who are interested in that particular topic, you might be interested to know that Drupal 7 plus rules actually is quite competitive to like multi-million-dollar business rules solutions. So that was pretty interesting. We had no idea that that was a problem space that we would sort of fall into as we were doing some work on we had very modest ambitions in terms of forms and simplifying workflows, and all of a sudden people who were interacting with these gigantic vendors around these business rules engine solutions started to get very interested in those pilots, and we were able to prototype things really rapidly and successfully with them. That's something that people are passionate about. Let's talk offline, because I know that we'll come back to that one day.
You hungry?
Okay, well, maybe that's a good place to wrap up for lunch. Thanks so much for
Thanks.
coming.
We have to turn off your
Yep.
record.
Why don't you be here so that way you can see your face?
I'd be so surprised.
And there's Harlan Weber. Thanks for watching, everybody.